Okay. So we are recording it. Thanks everybody for being here. The Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program is a regional team partnering with Cornell Cooperative Extension in the 17 Eastern New York counties to serve the education and research needs of the commercial small fruit, vegetable, grape, and tree fruit growers in those counties. My name is Natasha Field, and I'm a technician with the program located in the Capital District area. Today, we are presenting highlights of the results of our 2020 variety trials that we conducted on seedless watermelons, peas, leeks, tomatoes, and potatoes. We also have special guest Sandy Menasha of CCE Suffolk to present the results of her heat-tolerant broccoli trial. All of the full reports are up on the Teachable platform as well as the website. So you can access them in either location, and we'll be posting the links in the chat as we go through. If you have questions as we go through the presentations, please post them in the chat. If we have time during each presentation, we will address them as we go, but otherwise we will answer the questions at the end. We will have about 20 minutes for questions after the presentations, and I just ask that you stay muted during the presentations. And then during the Q&A at the end, you can unmute to ask a question. All right, so first up is Teresa Rusinek, who is an ENYCHP vegetable specialist located in the Hudson Valley. She will be talking about the seedless watermelon trial. And then Teresa, I think I will stop sharing my screen and
should be able to share now.
You should be able to share now.
Okay, I think we want to go here. How does that look?
Looks good.
Okay, so I'm going to review some of the varieties that we grew in our seedless watermelon variety trial this past season. And let's see. So I'll start off with some information about the trial. It was sited in Ulster County at Wallkill View Farms. They seeded the varieties for us on May 6th into 38 cell trays. They were transplanted June 5th onto raised black plastic mulch beds on 7-foot centers, and there was 3.3 feet or 40 inches between the plants. 2 rows, hopefully you can see my cursor here. These 2 rows were the seedless varieties, and the center row was the pollinator variety. We harvested 5 times in August, starting August 3rd, I believe, and the fruit was graded into 60 counts, 45 counts, 36 counts, and 30 counts. So fertility-wise, the grower put down 300 pounds of dry fertilizer per acre, and that was a triple 13. Additional 20 pounds per acre actual N was put down at and again at fruit set. The pre-plant herbicide was applied between the rows of plastic after bed formation, and that was a tank mix of Prowl H2O and Sandia at rates of 2.5 pints per acre. Okay, so let's start with our varieties. First, from Cicada Seeds, we have Citation. It's a medium green striped skin watermelon with a bright pink flesh. Average fruit weight was 12.6 pounds. Average length 9.5 inches. In our taste test, it rated 4 out of 5, so that's quite high. Had a strong watermelon flavor. It was not super sweet, but still very tasty. It was juicy and had a good texture. A lot of marketable fruit, 4,680 per acre, and most of those were in the 60 count range. Next, we have Cracker Jack, and this one was by far one of our favorites. And this one also from Vitalis Seed. It's a dark green striped skin watermelon, medium to dark red flesh, average fruit weight 15.9 pounds, average length 11.2 inches. The taste test rated highest 4.5 out of 5. So really good tasting, super sweet taste, very delicious and juicy. The taste did fade fast in the mouth, and the texture was crisp, melted in the mouth. Also good yield. We had 4,149 marketable fruit per acre, and most of those were in the 45 count range. Also, the fruit was very consistent in size and shape, and like I said, one of our favorites. Okay, next we have Eclipse. This is a round seedless watermelon from Cicada Seed, dark green solid skin, as you can see, medium red flesh. The average fruit weight was 12.3 pounds, average length 8.9 inches. In our taste test, it rated 2.5 out of 5. So not our favorite in terms of flavor, but it was, still very good. We did see some internal splitting and dryness. It was a decent but not standard seedless watermelon taste, and it did have a melt in the mouth texture. All the fruit we opened had cracking, unfortunately, and splitting, but the flesh was still perfectly good to eat. And with that one, we had 4,893 marketable fruit, and 80% of those were in the 60 count range. Okay, next we have Joyride. And I think this is one that the grower usually grows each season. But anyway, that one is from Seminus Seed. It's a medium green striped skin with a dark pink flesh. The average fruit weight was 17.9 pounds, which is highest in the trial. The average length was 11.7 inches. The taste rated, in the taste test, it rated 3.25 out of 5. So it was decent tasting and super juicy. The texture was somewhat chewy, and it did last in the mouth. 3,085 marketable fruit per acre, and the highest percentage of those were in the 30 count range. Okay, next is Kingman from Cicada Seed. This is a light green striped skin watermelon, medium red flesh, average fruit weight 16 pounds, average length 10.9 inches. So in the taste tests, it rated 3.75 out of 5. So very good flavor. It wasn't super sweet, but it did also have decent texture, and we found the flavor did fade fast. So this one produced 3,191 marketable fruit, and about 50% were in the 45 count range. So it was one of the things we noticed, that it wasn't consistent in size and shape of fruit. And then from Vitalis Seed, Red Amber. This is a light green striped skin watermelon with pink flesh. Average fruit weight 16.9 pounds. Average length 11.5 inches. In our taste test, it rated 3.5 out of 5. It had a good flavor. It wasn't super sweet, but very juicy and had a nice crunchy texture. It lingered in the mouth a little and can get chewy if it's overripe. Produced the most total weight, and the most marketable fruit were in the 36 count range. Okay, then we have Red Garnet, again from Vitalis Seed. It's a medium green striped skin watermelon with a medium red flesh. Average fruit weight 14.1 pounds, and length was 10.9 inches. In our taste test, it rated 4.25 out of 5, so that's quite high. Had nice sweet flavor, and it was very juicy. It had a melt in the mouth texture. So this one produced 2,766 marketable fruit, and half of those were in the 60 count range and the other half in the 45 count range. So this was one of our favorites for the way it looked and the taste, but it was one of the lower yielding or the lowest yielding in marketable fruit. Okay, then red opal. This is a light green striped skin watermelon with a medium red flesh. The average fruit weight 14.6 pounds, average length 10.7 inches. In our taste tests, it rated 3.75 out of 5. Was a decent tasting and juicy, moderately sweet fruit. Texture varied, but generally on the softer side, and it melted in the mouth nicely. Some size variation was noted in mature fruit. It produced 4,255 marketable fruit per acre, and about 50% were in the 60 count range. And then we move on to Secretariat, which is from Cicada seed. It's a medium green striped skin watermelon with a bright pink flesh. The average fruit weight 12.9 pounds, average length 9.8 inches. In our taste test, rated 3.75 out of 5. With sweet, it was sweet and tasty, had a good crisp texture. Some of the fruit did have a few brown seeds. This one produced 5,744 marketable fruit per acre, with most of those in the 60 count range. And it was the variety that produced the most marketable fruit in our trial. Okay, last but not least, this was the only yellow fleshed seedless variety in our trial. It's from Cicada seed, yellow buttercup. This is a light green striped skin watermelon, obviously yellow fleshed, with fruit weighing an average of 12 pounds. Length is 8.7 inches, has a round shape, as you can see. In our taste tests, it rated 2.5 out of 5. In taste tests, it was viewed as a different taste than standard seedless watermelons. It did taste decent, more acidic or musky, and it had a decent texture. And I felt like the flavor improved with time. So, you know, toward the, last couple of harvests, I thought it tasted better. And apparently it's a pretty good seller at the farm stand, so people like it. We produced 5,531 marketable fruits in our trial, and 81% were in the 60 count range. So they're not really huge fruits. And it was the second in number of marketable fruit produced. And with that, I will end. Hopefully I was under my 10 minutes. I want to thank our host farm and for working with us on this variety trial. John Ferranti was really very helpful and involved in this variety trial, and he was out there with us every time we came out to do our harvests, and he helped us harvest and do some tasting. And so thank you to Wallkill View Farms, and also to Cicada seed, Vitalis seed, and Semina seed for contributing to our trial. And a special thank you to Natasha Field and Sarah Tobin. They work with us as technicians in our program, and they were instrumental in harvesting and putting together the data. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. So
Okay, stop sharing.
Go ahead and stop sharing. Next up is Crystal Stewart Cortens. She's an Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program vegetable specialist located in the Capital District. She will be talking about the pea and leek trials. So Crystal, go ahead and share your screen. And unmute yourself.
That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Natasha. I'm just going to wave and say hello. I'm not a robot. And then I'm going to turn off my video, because I have somewhat lower bandwidth here. And we'll just focus on having the PowerPoint slides here in front of me. I'm also going to start a timer so that Natasha doesn't have to stop me. So I'm actually going to be featuring two different trials back to back here. We're going to start by talking about the sugar, snap, and shell pea trial that we did in a high tunnel this year. And this was exciting because I have not had an opportunity to look at the different varieties of peas that are available recently. Natasha actually turned us on to doing this trial because she noted that Pure Line Seeds in particular had come up with a lot of new and exciting varieties that would be interesting for us to try. So we actually did a screening trial of pretty much everything new that was available that we could find. If anybody knows of anything additional, we'll be doing another year of trialing. So please send us anything that you think should be included. But we had shell varieties, a fairly large number of snap varieties, which is certainly the most popular in fresh market production, and then a handful of snow varieties, all in the high tunnel. So because this is a screening trial, there's no replication. Really, we're getting to know the varieties, we're getting to know how they perform in the tunnel. And it was actually fascinating to look at the differences that we saw across the varieties. So what we're seeing here is actually just the difference of varieties emerging from the ground. What we see on the far right are called the aphilotypes, which are often used for sprout production. These are hypertendril peas. So they come out immediately with tendrils, and a lot of the leaves have actually been replaced by tendrils for the entire growing season. So it's interesting. It can be a benefit in trellising and a bit of a drawback in harvest, which we'll talk about later. So about the trial, as I mentioned, this was planted in a high tunnel. And the reason for this is because we wanted to get a jump on the season and also look at a technique that a lot of growers in the Capital District are tending to use now so that they can push their peas into market earlier, either at the end of the winter market season to gain excitement, or to give people something interesting at the early spring markets. So we have quite a few growers in the Capital District who do a great job of this. So we wanted to make sure that we could tell them whether or not the varieties that they're using are the ones that actually make sense. You can see that when we planted this trial on the ground or on the tunnel, there was snow on the ground. If you look right outside the tunnel there, our planting dates for this were 3/31 and 4/9. So for the lower parts of our region, we probably didn't have snow on the ground, but I should mention this trial was actually located in Johnstown, New York, or as my partner likes to call it, the tundra. So we certainly do have snow later. If you're considering doing this kind of planting and you want to look at tunnel dates, probably you could go quite a bit earlier. But if we started on those dates, we began harvesting on June 6th, just to give you a sense of how long it took the peas to develop in the tunnel. And I should mention that this is a relatively low fertility tunnel. This tunnel's only been in production for a year. It doesn't have massive amounts of compost or nutrients added to it yet. So it actually had somewhat low potassium. So next year we'll be optimizing the potassium levels in the pea trial. And I think that'll actually help with our fruit quality a little bit. So I'm just going to actually give you the highlights of these trials because as was mentioned in the previous trial information, we already have the variety reports posted online. So if you want to look at the details on each and every variety, we have all of that information available for you right now. I'm sure Natasha will be posting a link to that if she hasn't already. So if I'm skipping information that you would like to find that's easily available, I'm only going to touch on the absolute highlights of these trials. So we'll start off looking at the shell peas, which were actually really interesting. And if you're not in an area where shell peas are still popular, go ahead and, gloss right past this, but it's actually amazing how interested people are in shell peas in certain areas of our region. I know that where I live, shell peas are still actually a really big deal. People get very excited about that short window of being able to get a hold of these. So being able to offer some new and exciting options was great. So the key highlight from the shell peas was a new variety called PLS 534. I know it's a really exciting name, and you're just going to remember that immediately. Pureline has not named a lot of their varieties, even a few that are already commercially released, and this is one of them. But we were just really, really excited about this pea. Unlike what we'll see when we're looking at the snap and snow peas, this pea was the best performer in a lot of different categories. So it had the best weight at harvest. It also had the best flavor. And you'll see that with shell peas, they were all pretty delicious. We really, really enjoyed tasting the shell peas. In fact, we realized that when we were doing taste testing, we had to end with the shell peas because if we tasted them first, everything else tasted bad. They were just so good. But this one actually stood out as being just absolutely phenomenal. And the picture that you're seeing above is a picture of what this pea looked like. So the pod itself was a vibrant green when you were picking it. So it was very attractive prior to actually pulling it. And then when you opened it up, they were usually extremely uniform, and the fill was just remarkable. So we had lots of good things to say about this pea, really excited about continuing to trial it in the future. Moving right on to the snap peas, this is where we started to see a lot of differences forming. So we had a different winner in each category that we were looking at. Super Sugar Snap had the highest yield. So if you're just going for getting yield out, that's a clear winner for us. And it had pretty good flavor. I mean, a 4.5 out of 5 is still definitely a pea that you would want to eat. But if you were looking just for extraordinary flavor, 2 of the new varieties from Pureline were actually really interesting. SS141 and SS32. Both had exceptional flavor. And when we rated something a 5, it meant that it was really a consistent winner across different pickings and with different taste testers. So that was interesting. Another thing to consider if you're looking for consistency in your market is how long you'll be able to harvest those peas. So if you're looking for a pea that just performs for a much longer time, the winner in that category was actually Sugar Ann. So, you know, we've got lots of different categories that we can look at and lots of different reasons to select from the different sugar snaps that are available. Finally, we've got the category of the snow peas, and this was a much smaller category. There just aren't that many varieties available. So our comparisons are fairly limited, but it was interesting to see just how much difference there was. And I was really pleasantly surprised by how well these performed in the tunnel. They didn't love the heat, I have to say. And we had a pretty warm early spring. Despite having snow, we then jumped to being at 90. So these peas went through a lot of temperature stress. You know, peas certainly don't like warm temperatures in general. So the high tunnel didn't end up being the best place for them, but they held on pretty well. And you know, the quality of the peas that we grew in there was just phenomenal. I'm sure you all noticed that they were all trellised, both the bush types and the indeterminate ones, because that certainly saves you on space, and in a tunnel, that's absolutely essential. But we had literally no disease in the tunnel. So that's another consideration to be thinking about. So on to the actual pea varieties that we have here. Mammoth Melting was certainly the best yielding pea that we had by quite a lot, actually. So if you're looking to really get a lot of yield out of your peas, that's a good one. And you'll notice the flavor is not great. Now, the question that we had, and we didn't explore this year because this was not the year to go out and talk to chefs, is this is more of a cooking pea. You know, you don't tend to eat snow peas raw. So does it really matter that it had a 3.8 rating as a raw pea, or is it actually perfectly acceptable as a cooked pea? And I didn't feel like we were qualified to really answer that question. So we just left our rating system consistent, but you can see that, you know, if you were just looking for yield, that's a clear winner. And if you're looking for a raw pea that had great flavor, we actually really liked Avalanche. So as I mentioned, This is a first year of this trial, and we're looking to expand this work into next year. And some of the questions that we want to ask are how well some of these varieties will actually fare outside. So we'll be pairing this with an outdoor piece of the trial. And then we'd like to push our planting date earlier inside so that we can push to have more of the pea growing season be in that cooler period. So we'll be pushing to see what the earliest possible harvest date is. And we may explore whether or not a fall crop is a viable option. That's something that Dr. Reiners out at Cornell was expressing to us. So we're interested in looking at that. And I'd like to just thank all of the seed companies that were involved in the trial, which included High Mowing, Pureline, and Harris for their contributions. We're really grateful and we're looking forward to doing another year of work with you. All right. So I'm going to pivot right into the leeks, and then we'll see if I have any time for questions, but I suspect not. We'll wait for questions till the end. So the leek trial was again hosted by Philia Farm, which is our home farm here. This being a pandemic, it was really a wonderful year to be able to step out of the backyard and do some trialing. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to do that. And many thanks to my partner for supporting that effort. That was very helpful. So the leek trial was a lot of fun. Natasha will tell you that we had far too many leeks, and she's right, but this is a screening trial. So before I go any further, I have to say, we've heard too many leek jokes. I just want to get them out of the way. Every time I talk about this trial, somebody brings me a leek pun. So behold, here's a few of them. I tried to talk to some of my colleagues about this last week, and they wondered if I was creating an early leak. It goes on and on. So now we've gotten that out of the way. So back to the leeks. This is another screening trial, just like the peas. This is a year for us to really get to know this crop, understand how to trial it effectively so that we can come back next year and really have a successful effort with evaluating the leeks that we choose to move forward with, which certainly won't be all 34. But we did want to make a conscious effort to look at everything that was out there, both open pollinated and hybrid. And I haven't mentioned it yet, so I should mention it now. Both of these trials are done in an organic system. Philia Farm is certified organic, so all of this is being done organically. So one of the questions that I continue to get from growers as I'm mentioning that we do the leek trial, especially after I show my giant leek picture, which I have to do, I'm morally obligated, is how the heck do you grow leeks? So I do want to just take a second to walk you through the process of how we grew the leeks for this trial. So we started by planting the leek seed into strip trays on March 17th. And the strip tray is what you see in the back left-hand corner of the slide on the left. So these are literally just strips. You put the seed in so close that it's almost touching, sprinkled throughout those. And then they live in the strip trays for just about a month. So this saves you a huge amount of space in the greenhouse at a moment when maybe you don't want to be heating the whole thing. And then a month later, we actually moved the tiny transplants, which looked like little pieces of grass, as you see in the foreground here, into open flats. And what we used was actually Vermont compost, the Fort Light mix. So it's still a fairly heavy mix, but it's an organic mix. And this took a lot of time. I have to admit that I need to get better at this in order to be a commercially viable leek farmer. So hand planting these into open flats is something that I need to develop a better technique for, or perhaps talk to some of my more talented grower friends and find out how they do it quickly. But open flats for a whole month, actually about a month and a week. And then we get to the point where we have the transplants that you see on the right here. So what Natasha's doing here is she's pulling out all of one variety and grouping it together. And then before we transplant those, we actually trim the roots down to about 1 inch long, in our case using sheep shears, which are pretty quick. And we give the top a little trim as well, so that we're reducing our transplant shock. And when you're planting something like leeks, when you shove those roots into the ground, especially if they start to go upward, they're going to die anyway. So then you just have dying material surrounding your plant. So trimming them off is actually a good sanitation measure that also prevents disease. So transplanting in this case was all done by hand. If you remember, that was a very dry period. So we had to get these in the ground, and then very quickly, we actually ran drip over the top of these. And then this section eventually ended up being irrigated by mega nets as the rest of the section was planted. But the leeks were the first thing to go in, and the mega net system was not set up for this section yet. So fertility wise, this field is relatively new into production. So it has pretty good organic matter, somewhere around 5%. We applied 2,000 pounds of Crayer's 543 onto this field, which gives you 100 pounds of nitrogen, 80 pounds of phosphorus, and 60 pounds of potassium. So we really didn't push it that hard, is the bottom line. We did try to minimize stress on those transplants and optimize their growing conditions. Last thing, the rows are 18 inches apart on the bed, and we have 6-inch spacing in between the rows. So you see the plants going in. Thank you to Natasha and Laura for doing that, and to my dog Lucy for supervising. And then on the right, we see what those leeks looked like a couple weeks before we started the harvesting process. So I'm going to quickly go through the highlights of the summer, fall, and then winter leeks. And again, all of this information is located in the report that you'll have available to you. So if you're looking for specifics about a certain leak, all of that is available in the report. I'm just going to hit the highlights. So with the summer leeks, the real question was, is King Richard the best? Because almost everybody automatically goes to King Richard for a summer leek. And the answer, of course, is it depends on what you're trying to do. There are some summer leeks that look remarkably like fall leeks at the time that you want to be harvesting. And the question is that really what people want? Varieties like King Richard are lighter green, they're a little bit thinner, they're a little bit taller. They don't look quite like a stocky fall leek. So I don't know exactly what the answer is for whether or not varieties like Lancia and Skater are going to be well adapted for our markets. But I can tell you that they certainly perform better. So if you can sell them pound per pound, you're going to get much better yields from varieties other than King Richard, according to our preliminary data. Of course, we'll be repeating this, but we were really impressed by some of the summer leeks that we have available. One of the things that you'll want to note when you're looking at the report is that we have the suggested days to harvest listed for those that had them. And then we also have the actual days to harvest. And there were some discrepancies between when a variety was recommended for harvest and when we actually started to. So know that you have some flexibility in whether or not you're harvesting those at the days that are recommended. A few other highlights from our summer leeks, just so you can see those. And one nice thing about this trial is that we did have a lot of diversity in where the seed came from. Different seed companies were able to come through with some really interesting stuff. So Poncho over on the left-hand side is from Adaptive Seed Company, that's open pollinated. Of course, King Richard is open pollinated. But then we've got Skeeter and Columbus coming from Bijou, which are both hybrids. So lots of different options available for really high quality leeks. I was really excited about the fall leek trial because we had some remarkable, beautiful leeks coming through this trial. And one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is for next year, whether or not we can actually hold some of these varieties and continue winter sales, because avoidance is one of the techniques that we're probably going to be looking for with allium leaf miner. So I have a question lingering about that, which we'll think about for next year. But in the meantime, we did have a lot of different fall leeks to look at. And we had some really, really exciting varieties. Of course, the standard that most people would think of with these fall leek varieties is Megaton. And we included that in the trial. It came through right in the middle. It's still a solid performer. It holds extraordinarily well in the field. So certainly you want to be considering that as well. But one of my favorites, both from a yield perspective and from a quality perspective, was Chinook, which came from High Mowing. And this is a very upright, beautifully colored leek. I liked the architecture a lot. You didn't end up with a lot of dead leaves or damaged leaves flopping down at the bottom. It was relatively easy to clean because it wasn't bulbing. And of course, the yield is absolutely phenomenal. So we're looking forward to trialing that again in the future. Other notables, so there's Megaton on the right, and you can see that color-wise, Megaton is a little greener than some of these other leeks. So if you're looking for a nice blue leek, there are other options. We did find that some of those other options did have a little bit more of a bulb, which can make them a little bit harder to clean, but it's also more of that nice white part that you want to be eating. So, you know, it's a trade-off on whether or not you want to go with something that's nice and straight and doesn't have a bulb, or something that does and causes a little bit more trouble on that side. And then finally, just quickly, I want to mention that we also did the winter leeks. And this is where we started to run into problems. We did have allium leaf miner move in for the first time this year at our farm. So we do have allium leaf miner in the winter leeks, which means that we actually destroyed the plot instead of holding them in the winter to see how these leeks would actually overwinter for us, because we don't want to overwinter the allium leaf miner. So next year we'll be looking at using exclusion netting and keeping the allium leaf miner out of these leeks so that we can do that work. But these are really more of the bulbing leeks primarily, a lot of open pollinated varieties, a lot of interesting varieties, which you'll see in the pictures from the report. But again, not anything super noteworthy. We really want to focus on the fall leeks if we're thinking about things to try for this next year. And this is an area of further research for the future. So I already mentioned a few of the questions that we have for next year. We also want to look at holding leeks in the field across the board to see which of them we can actually continue to harvest for a longer period of time, because we were pleasantly surprised by how often we could do that, even in a hot year like this. And then we also want to add a longer term storage component for next year. So again, thank you to our seed company cooperators. In this case, that was Bijou, Vitalis, Johnny's, High Mowing, and Seed Savers, who all contributed generously to this trial. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Crystal. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we'll circle back during the Q&A session. Next up is Chuck Bourne, Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program Vegetable Specialist located in the Capital District. He will be talking about the tomato and potato trials. All right, go ahead, Chuck. Chuck, I don't see your screen. It turned back off and you are also still muted. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. I am here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Let's see. My technical issues are actually involving my mouse this morning. Come on. Okay. Let's see. What is going on here? I apologize for this. Of course, it would be me that would have the issues here. Okay. Is everybody, Natasha, are you seeing, what are you seeing on your screen?
I am seeing the PowerPoint editing view, but I'm seeing your tomato trial.
It is the tomato trial.
Yep.
All right. For some reason, I cannot get it into. All right. I cannot get it into full screen mode. So we'll just.
Okay.
Wow. Now this worked fine earlier. So nothing. All right, so if it's all right, I think if we, Sandy, if you, I'm gonna throw you in on the spot here. If you could actually give your broccoli presentation, and I'm gonna log off here and try to log back on and see if I can get this to work, because right now it is not working.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you. Natasha?
Yeah, go ahead and hop off.
I'm trying.
All right. You know what? I might boot you. Oh, you went. Okay.
Please do.
Okay, so then instead of Chuck, we will have Sandy Menasha, who's a vegetable and potato specialist with CCE Suffolk. She's going to be talking about her heat-tolerant broccoli trials. All right.
Okay, let me just get to. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to be, as Natasha said, talking about these heat-tolerant broccoli variety trials that were conducted here on Long Island. I did these trials in 2019 and 2020, so this past season. We replicated, so we had 4 replicates per variety. These varieties were seeded in May in 128s, and they were field planted on June 24th. The rows were spaced 34 inches apart, and the transplants were set 18 inches apart within the row. We had a harvest starting mid-August in both years, August 15th in 2019, August 16th, 2020, and then we ended harvest September 4th or 3rd, depending on the year. And we harvested these varieties as they reached maturity. Before, I'm just going to jump back into a little bit of some background here. These heat tolerant trials were conducted because broccoli is just one of those vegetables that it seems like every family puts in their shopping cart once per week. We're really good here at growing broccoli in the fall. We have some growers that are playing around with spring, and we have more and more people trying to produce broccoli in the spring season. But then we also have a lot of growers, I'm sure, in other regions as well, that want to extend that harvest into the summer months as well and have that season long from spring through fall, excuse me, broccoli harvest time. So this was looking specifically at the summer kind of production and how well these varieties would handle the heat of the summer and how they would perform. So in 2000, and just a couple of things, these were overhead irrigated. We did apply some fungicides in both years. In 2019, we didn't really start the fungicide applications early enough, and we had a lot of alternaria. In 2020, we started a little bit early, but we still had a lot of alternaria in our plots. And you'll see that a lot just with growing broccoli in the summer because you have those perfect conditions. We have rain events or overhead irrigation that's happening as we get closer to harvest in that late July, early August period, followed by warm, hot weather, and that is perfect for alternaria. So if you are going to be producing this, you need to be on a very strict fungicide schedule with products that work well in order to gain a little bit of control over those or over that disease. So 2019, these are a list of the varieties we looked at. And in 2020, we replicated a lot of those varieties, but didn't have in Millennium and these 2 numbered lines from Seminis in 2020. Instead, we looked at Green Magic and Hydra instead. So just a look at some of the growing conditions temperature-wise for 2019. On the left of the screen there, you have the low temperatures in 2019 for the months of July and August. July being the dark blue, August being the light blue. And as you can see, the kind of 3rd week of July, we had some pretty high, low temperatures. We got, nothing, well, we were around 75, 78 as a low in that mid-July period. And then on the right, you see our high temperatures for 2019. Again, the July temperature highs are in the light orange and the August temperature highs are in the dark orange. And end of July, or kind of mid to end of July and beginning of August, you have those temperatures that are above 85 and going into 90. So our temperatures were definitely high enough to cause some stress on those broccoli heads as they were developing. And this is for 2020, same thing, low temperatures on the right, high temperatures on the left, high temperatures on the right. And you have July and August listed there as well. Our temperatures for 2020 were higher than they were, both the lows and the high temps were higher in 2020 than they were in 2019. So 2020 was definitely, this past season, a more stressful time for that crop. And we see that in how the varieties performed. So in 2019, our top performers were Eastern Crown and this numbered line from Seminis. Then Asteroid, Imperial, Emerald Crown, and Lieutenant performed just under them very well. I would definitely in that year would have been happy with any of those varieties, but Eastern Crown and the SVB numbered line were the top performers. Eastern Magic and Emerald Star did not produce any marketable heads for us in 2019. In 2020, being a more stressful year, both with the drought, even though we overhead irrigated regularly, and the high temperatures, the high highs and the low highs, Asteroid and Imperial were our top performers. Lieutenant and Abrams did, fairly well, so those would be something I would also potentially consider. But Eastern Magic, Emerald Crown, Emerald Star, and Green Magic did not produce any marketable heads. So it was interesting to see in 2019, Eastern Crown was our top performer, but then in 2020, Eastern Crown, never mind. We actually did get a couple, maybe one head, marketable head in 2020 of the Eastern Crown, so it didn't perform as well. Here are some pictures. I don't go into a lot of detail about these varieties themselves, just because, again, we were just looking at marketability and a lot of them did not produce any marketable heads per acre. So in 2019, here is Eastern Crown. We had a very nice dome. We had very few bracts, which is the leaves that are coming through the heads. We had very even heads. So in 2019, Eastern Crown really was a very good performer and one of my favorites in the trial. Here's Asteroid, which performed well in 2019. We don't have as nice of that dome head. We have a little slight unevenness in there, but for summer production, this was a fairly good variety as well in 2019. Here is Imperial. We have these, and both of these two, the stalks were really nice and thick, as you can see down here in the Imperial. You have these nice thick stalks. The stems themselves are kind of stocky. They haven't elongated. We got these nice dome heads again with the Imperial. Slight unevenness, but really nothing too bad. So the marketable heads were nice. Lieutenant, same thing. We had the nice thick stalk. We had these short stocky stems, good dome, very few bracts, very few unevenness. But I don't know if you can tell in here, there's some slight discoloration in the Lieutenant in 2019. We got those brown, purple type beads on the heads in the Lieutenant in 2019 on some of the heads. And here is the other top performer in 2019, that numbered line from Seminis. Very low alternaria in this variety and extremely nice marketable heads. Good solid stems or stalks, and the stems were nice and short. They weren't elongated, very nice dome, and very few defects in those marketable heads. So in 2020, these top performers, Asteroid, which was probably second in line in 2019 and a top performer in 2020, did very well. We do have some bracts developing, some leaves coming through in some of the heads, but overall we had a really nice dome, We had pretty uniform and, uniform heads in the ones that were marketable. And again, not much alternaria in this variety at all. Yeah. So Imperial, which was a top performer in, which was a top performer in 2020. We see a little bit more of the effects of the heat on these marketable heads. As you can see here in this head on the left, we have that unevenness that I was talking about in the dome of the florets. But some of these marketable heads that were there are very nice. They did dome out nice. We didn't have all that unevenness that I was talking about before. So here is Lieutenant. Didn't perform great in 2020, where in 2019 it did fairly well. We have more of this unevenness in the head. We have these stems that tend to elongate a little bit more, which caused that unevenness. And when you get this, you get those water droplets that hang out in the head, causing more alternaria and other soft rot issues. So Lieutenant did okay in 2020. And here's Abrams, which is another one that did okay in 2020. Again, not one of the top performers, because again, we had a lot more heat issues and heat related issues with Abrams, but it did produce more marketable heads than some of the other varieties. So some of the common defects, which I mentioned, but that we saw in a lot of these varieties like Hydra, we just see this poor bead development and this yellow beading in that heat. It could just not really produce a marketable head whatsoever for us. This top left corner, this is the alternaria that I'm talking about. And when all that black on the inside of the heads, and when you get those uneven heads and you don't have that nice dome, you get water that sits, which either starts as alternaria and then turns to soft rot, or just starts as soft rot. You get a lot of disease issues, and we had a lot of that unevenness from heat related stress. And here is some more alternaria. You can see it on the leaves. I do want to point out that let's see, Asteroid and Abrams probably had the lowest levels of alternaria in our trial in 2020. So that is something you should consider, as I mentioned, because these summer varieties tend to get alternaria more so. Then this is something that we had in the Lieutenant. You get more of that brown purple discoloration of the beads from those heat related stress. So final recommendations based on the results from 2019 and 2020, I'm going to have to say Imperial and Asteroid would be my top recommendations. Again, the marketable heads per plot for both of these varieties in both years were probably about 25%. So we're not talking about a high percentage of marketable heads. In 2019, that percentage was probably closer to 35, but in 2020, we were looking at only 25% marketable heads of the best producing varieties. So I think we still have a little ways to go with some of these, but it's good to know that if we aren't so stressed with water and heat, we do have some varieties that will perform fairly well for us for those summer markets. Because I am lacking with a lot of the things that I think about nowadays, I forgot to include the thank yous, and I do want to thank those seed companies that did provide seed for these varieties: Cicada, Seedway, Harris, Seminis, Stokes, and Johnny's. So thank you all for providing seed for these trials. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, Sandy. The 2019 broccoli reports, we don't have a link for it yet, but it will be up. It is currently up in the Teachable platform where you signed up, and we will have a public link soon enough. All right.
2020 trials, I'm on maternity leave right now. So when I get back in January, I'll start working, putting those together, and then I'll send it to you, Natasha, and then you can post them.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so we're gonna go back to Chuck Bornt, vegetable specialist located in the Capital District, and he's gonna talk about the tomato and potato trials. If all the technology works.
Okay, so I'm back. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yep.
All right. And we're still going to try. There, how's that?
It works.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Sandy, for adjusting your schedule. I'm sorry about that. Of course, it would have to be me that would have the technological issues. So 2020, Natasha and I looked at 13 different beefsteak tomato varieties. The trial was located at Altobelli Family Farms in Kinderhook, which is in Columbia County. John is a conventional grower. We tend to focus our trials on determinate varieties that are beefsteak. And so we seeded these at John's on May 7th, and then he took care of them for the duration of the period and then planted them on June 12th. We started harvest August 21st, did 4 harvests, but usually once a week. These were all on raised beds, black plastic mulch, 24-inch in-row spacing, so the plants were 24 inches on 60-inch centers. And then the way these are graded, we try to use our growers' standards, and essentially he has a large, a medium, and a small is what his categories are, and that's what we'll be basing most of our information on in all the tables and whatnot that you'll see and that Natasha has posted for this variety trial. I always like to, I know this graph might be a little bit dizzying, but I always like to put this in for the simple fact that it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the distribution and differences in these varieties. And you can see that Red Snapper and Camaro did very well for the bulk of the trial. And some of the other varieties, like something like Galahad, as you'll see as we start talking, had some issues. Still, I just like to put that in. And then also just as a overall yield versus a marketable yield, just to see where things kind of fit in line. So go right into the variety trial, and kind of like Crystal, we have all 13 varieties in here, but some I'll focus on a little bit more than others, but I do want to at least have you get a look at most of these varieties. So Red Snapper is from Seedway. It had the highest total harvest and most large fruit by category. So very, very good, high producing variety. Okay on flavor and texture, and when I report about flavor and texture, it's a little bit probably skewed because I am the taster. Unfortunately, Natasha does not care for tomatoes, so it was left in my hands to do the flavor and the texture ratings. So, yield-wise, we like this one. In terms of the texture and the flavor, it was fine. It was passable. But as you'll see, there's some others that if you're kind of in the market for flavor, there's some others that you might want to take a look at. But Red Snapper by far was one of the best producers. Camaro was right there with it. This is from Cicada. Again, this one had the highest percentage of large fruit by weight. 73% of what we picked of this variety made it into the large category. And for Altobelli Family Farms, that's the tomato that he's looking for, is a large. That's what his market demands. So this is one that fits his needs quite nicely. What's interesting is if you look, 26% we had in this variety were culls. So unfortunately, we lost almost a third of our weight, a yield right there. So a little bit of issue with some radial cracks, which almost every variety had issues with this year. And we were very dry. So again, it comes down to probably a water management issue and making sure that we maintain consistent moisture. And it's hard to do that, of course, when you have Mother Nature that throws rain at you every once in a while too. But this one had a good, strong tomato flavor. It was firm, so it'll be good for putting in a box and shipping. and good flavor. Bijou 3437. This again was very good in marketable weight, and had very nice dark red flesh. And it's also interesting to note that this variety has what they call the crimson gene, which allows it to have that darker red flesh, but also allows it to have higher levels of lycopene, which probably is why it had some of the best tasting ratings in this trial. So one to keep an eye on and to take a look at for the future market. STM 2255, again, good flavor, but unfortunately we're looking at 18% cull rate, which it starts to get a little bit unwieldy when it gets up to that level. But decent yields, good large, nice upright globe shaped fruit, which I would say 95% of these varieties are. They're more of an upright globe, not a flat round, which is also something to note. And in the trial reports, which Natasha will post, we do a little more, give you a little more information on the shape of those varieties. Grand Marshal, again, okay, decent yield, but nothing that really stuck out other than the fact that when we ate this one, the one thing that we did notice is that it had a lot of fibers that ran through the flesh. And if you look right here, you might even be able to see a few of those fibers that run through that flesh, which actually did make it just a little bit unpleasant in the mouthfeel. Roadster. Roadster's been out for a few years, but we wanted, it's a standard for some folks. It's tends to be a little bit, I think, on the earlier side. It's very uniform in its size and its shape. It's dense. It's got good flavor. It's juicy. But again, we were looking at almost a third of what we picked having radio cracks and some rain check. So that was a little disappointing. The yields would have been a lot better. But when we do these trials, it is interesting to look at where you are with call rates in a diverse year like this. Kind of gives you an indication of what might do better in those seasons than other seasons. So again, Bijou 3353. It's a small core, which is always nice. Flavor was fine. Just falls out in yield wise on the lower end of things. Mountain Merit is John Altabelli's. That's the standard that was planted all around us as well as in our trial. But if you look at the very bottom of what I've got written there, I mean, this thing yields tremendously. However, a lot of it we couldn't market. It was just the radio cracks were either too numerous or too deep, which was disappointing because this thing from the Mountain series. So if you're used to growing Mountain Spring, Mountain Fresh, any of those, it has all of those Mountain series qualities. It's big, very big. It's dense and is a nice looking fruit, but unfortunately just had way too many culls. Tasty Lee is another interesting one. It's much smaller, as you can see. Half of the fruit are going to be in the medium size, with the remaining bulk of them in the small size category. But it produces a ton of fruit. And I think if you still have what I call a quart tomato market, so if you have a market that is looking for, you put 5 or 6, 7 tomatoes in a quart basket and you sell it that way, like a farmer's market maybe, this one is really one that I would take a look at. It's a pretty low cull variety, but also this one has 50% more lycopene in it, and they claim that it also has an extended shelf life, which makes it, I think, interesting variety to take a look at if you have a market for that smaller size fruit. Emmylou was another one that we had. And again, you know, for us, it's just there were way too many culls to really get a good idea of what this tomato could do. Jolene, again, it was fairly, again, it was inconsistent. It had a lot of those fibers that ran through it, which was not pleasant for me when I ate it. But again, it had very low cull rate, but probably a variety that I would like to see again, maybe to see what it does in a different year. Galahad, unfortunately, it just, you can see that the radio cracks in this were just tremendous, and we could not get hardly any marketable yield off of this. So I'm not, this is definitely a variety I'm not marketing or going to tell you to grow right now. And then B3212 also has the crimson gene, but again is a little bit on the small side. You can see over half of our marketable fruit were in that small category. So again, if your market is for that large beefsteak, 3212 is not going to fit that that market. So again, I will take that opportunity to thank Seedway and Bijou and Gowan and Cicada for supplying our seeds, and then also for John and Becky and the rest of the crew at Altobelli Family Farms for hosting this trial and putting up with us taking up space in their field and in their packing house. So with that, I'm going to continue right on because we also did for the 15th year now our potato variety trial, and these are all fresh market varieties, or a focus on fresh market varieties. Not necessarily, we don't look at chip varieties or anything like that. This year we ended up with, I think, 34 total varieties in this trial, which is about where we normally are, about 30 varieties. And again, here's that overall, just that graph to show you that, you know, we run anywhere from 250 hundredweights all the way down to, you know, 30 hundredweights in overall yield. So just a wide variation in overall yield on some of these varieties. And this is definitely one that I am only going to highlight the ones that we think have that you should try if you have the market for that certain variety, or one that you should you know, think about for your market. So again, this trial was located in Columbia County in Kinderhook at Semascot Orchards, and it's a conventional 30-inch rows with 12-inch in-row spacing on all of those. It was planted May 7th. It is irrigated. It was irrigated through the season, and we dug these on October 12th. We let them set for a little bit to heal up and cure, and then we went ahead and graded with our newly purchased grader with the change, and you'll see in the data table when you go to look, you know, chefs, which were 3-inch and larger, and then our A's, I think, were 2 inches, and then anything beyond, smaller than that fell into our B category. One thing with the potatoes that we always try to do also is our taste testing. So we'll bring these into the office, and we'll actually cook each one, eat them, and then talk a little bit about texture and flavor, and try to do a little bit more with them. And so that information is forthcoming. So we'll add that to those tables later in the season, and we'll let everybody know when that is going to happen. So I'll start with, we don't do a whole lot with standard whites, just because there's a lot of good standard white varieties out there, white skin, white flesh. But I want to highlight a few of these new varieties that are coming down the pipe that I would definitely keep an eye out for. They are, you know, in terms of yield and quality, I think are very good, and in some cases better than what some of our standard varieties are out there currently. So New York 171, kind of, when we saw this come up the chain, we were pretty impressed with it. The size was quite large. It's a slightly oblong variety. So I think we might have missed a few chefs that kind of might have fell down through the A chain, but were big enough to probably kick into the chef category. The as you can see, that's not a disease. That's a purple splash around those eyes, which again is what I think makes it look unique and different. So one that we are going to take a look at in the future. It's a Cornell line. So just again, something that we want to keep in the program and take a look at. Q112-5 is probably, if things go the way it looks, will be a replacement or an equal to Eva, which is just become a real standard variety. This is another Cornell release. Good size, plenty of chefs, large A's, and overall just a nice bright white skin, as you can see there in that picture. When I put out the seed request, the two things that I asked for are things that are unique or different. So we're always in the market for a new decent red variety, red skin, white flesh, and also anything that's yellow fleshed. And so you'll see in a few minutes that we have quite a few yellow flesh lines that are coming down the pipe. So this NDAF 113, this is from the University of Maine breeding program. It's done very well since 2018 for us, and did well again this year for us. Just a beautiful, clean, medium red skin, but a nice bright white flesh, and eats very well as we've noted in past trials. So a lot of nice A's, and even the B's are on the larger side. So pretty good, outstanding overall quality. Hopefully this one will move into being named soon and be commercially available for production. Those of you that have seen any of the potato variety presentations I've given in the past, you'll know that New York 118 is my favorite and is still my favorite, not only for how it grows, but also for its eating quality. It's just a very, very good eating variety. It's a little bit paler red, as you can see in this, but what I like about it is what you put into storage, the color is exactly what you get out of storage. So this doesn't tend to fade at all. But again, it's that flavor that really continues to be the positive for this variety. A few years ago, we started to look at a few of these, what they call high setting B varieties. There's a white that's available out there, and the reds that were available actually were taken off because they started to kick too many large A's. So Walter DeYoung at Cornell has been trying to reestablish those high setting B varieties, and I just want to mention it to you because they are interesting. And they tend to do very well, and they do very well early, which a lot of us, if you're looking to make money in the potato market, it's that early market that you're trying to hit. S77-1 again is one of those small setting high B varieties with some pretty good qualities. And again, we're going to take a look at this again to see where we go with it. This year we had 4 red skinned yellow flesh varieties that were a couple of them are very excited about. Baltic Rose being the top of those 4 varieties. Baltic Rose is from Child Stock Farm, so local seed potato grower right here in New York State, Northern New York. We did see a little bit of variability in the skin color this year. We have a dark, kind of a dark red, as you see, and then a slightly lighter red. But this variety also ended up being the highest yielding, but was also on the edge of the field and may have got a little extra water overshot from some sweet corn. My concern again is that as we get these larger varieties, we tend to see maybe some more internal disorders like hollow heart. And we did see that a little bit. I will also mention that Baltic Rose eats really, really well. One of our favorite varieties to eat. So this is definitely one that I would put on a short list to try. It's a very pretty dark yellow flesh too, which is nice. This is from Michigan State University, 161-4. Again, something I want to continue to look at. I think it has potential for us here for a red skin yellow flesh variety. The white skin yellow flesh lines by far was the biggest category that we had to look at this year. And unfortunately, out of 11, there's probably 4 or 5 that we really like and would like to continue to take a look at. So you can see that's all of them, 11 varieties. Bill Munda tends to be one of the top 3 that we really like. It's the highest yielding yellow flesh variety that we've seen. Oblong, nice dark yellow flesh. The only concern I have about this variety is I do see some variability in it from year to year. We get some knobs or some misshapes with this variety, which is a little bit disconcerting, but again, I think one that I would not hesitate to try if you have a very good yellow flesh white skinned market out there. Golden Globe was new for us, came from Child Stock Farm. Again, just some misshapes and some knobs, but overall did pretty well. We can't wait to also eat these. In past years, Bill Munda has done very well in our eating trials, tastes good. So we're hoping that Golden Globe will do the same. Maggie's also a new one for us. Again, seed is available from Child Stock Farms. It's round to slightly oblong, a little bit smaller, but again has that beautiful dark yellow flesh, which really makes it stand out. Natasha, for I don't know 3 or 4 years now, has been hands down our favorite white skin yellow flesh variety. It's oblong. It can be early as well, which is nice. Good size and pretty good overall yields, and eats really well. This is not only been one of our favorites for yield, but also for flavor. Paroli is also, we've had this for a couple years. This one is one that we like early, tends to have some decent size early, but again, nice medium yellow flesh and just a really smooth, bright skin appearance, which is what really makes it stand out a little bit. Yukon Gold is the standard, obviously, and you can see, you know, it does fine, but again, it's hollow heart that we worry about as one of the most concerning things with Yukon Gold when we grow it. Probably the second largest category that we get are purples, or I don't know what you want to call them, but odd varieties. So we have quite a few of those this year in trial, but Blackberry is a commercial variety. It's from MSU. And this is probably by far the darkest purple variety I've ever seen. It's almost black when you cut it. And it's a high setting B. So you get a lot of small A's and a lot of large B's. So really one that I would take a look at if you have a good purple market and you want to try something different to move in. As long as you know that when you go into this, it is a slightly smaller tuber. Again, MSU sending us some, these really beautiful dark purple flesh varieties. So we're still taking a look at these. I like the MSU lines because on the purple side, they are more of a round shape instead of an oblong shape. So that's why I tend to like these a little bit more. It's a little more traditional potato shaped, in my opinion. Then, of course, Walter Young at Cornell's kind of continuing, with the Adirondack Blues. This is probably something very similar, again, but much darker purple flesh than some of the previous releases. And then, of course, we have some other interesting varieties that are out there. The specialty lines. AF 5414 is again from the University of Maine. Has traditionally been our highest yielding variety the last couple of years. Did okay this year, but again, probably ranks in the top 5 for eating quality. Just a fantastic eating variety, good size, and tends not to have too many internal issues, if any, that we've seen yet. Again, MSU sent us a kind of a red skin pink flesh variety, which is interesting. Be interested to see how it eats. A good size, A little bit variable on shape, but you know, very attractive looking when everything is said and done. We also received a purple skin white flesh variety, as you can see here, MSC 4136P. So again, just something different out there to look at. I know sometimes the people like the purple skin, but they don't necessarily care for the purple flesh, and this would be a way to not have that. If you know, again, if your market is looking for something along those lines. One of our favorite russets the last couple of years is this AF 3362, which is now or has been marketed as Caribou Russet. If you haven't tried this, I really recommend that you do. It's very consistent in its shape and size and yield, and does really nicely in our environment. So with that, again, I want to thank all of our seed potato contributors. And with that, I'm done. So thank you again for bearing with me through those technical difficulties, and thank you for joining us. Natasha?
All right, thank you, Chuck. If you have any other questions about any of the trials, feel free to post them in the chat. I'm just going to go back and grab the questions that we had during the presentations. I believe Crystal answered one or two of them as we were going. Oop, hang on 1 second. If my slide would advance, there we go. And so everybody's emails are up here. So if you want to contact anybody, feel free. Let me pull the chat back up. All right, so let's see here. I guess the main question that we had for Sandy was, what was the main cause of unmarketability? Did the heads blow out due to heat and then alternaria, or was the alternaria acting as a primary takeout?
Yeah, so it was the heat related stress, like defects, that were the primary cause of the unmarketable heads. And then the alternaria came in and destroyed even more.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to post them in chat. We've got 5 minutes or so if you want to post anything. All of the reports, if you signed up through the Teachable program through the website, they're available there. They are also available on our main website, the ENYCH.cce.cornell.edu website. If you go to there, there is the crop section, and you can look through each crop for the reports. The recording will be available to you on the Teachable website as well, and we should be emailing that out. So we'll wait another couple minutes, and then if nobody else has any other questions, I want to thank everybody for coming out. All right, there was a question for Crystal about the in-row spacing and the depth for the leeks.
Yeah, the in-row spacing was 6 inches, and we were planting by hand, so depth was a little bit challenging, but we were basically planting as deep as we could. I'd say, what were you going, Natasha? Maybe 3.5, 4 inches deep if you could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had also done a small trench as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as part of our weed control, we did do some hilling, fairly light hilling, admittedly. You could certainly be more aggressive in that regard.
All right, if there's any other questions, feel free to post them. We'll wait another minute or two. Yeah, like I said, we will be sending an email out with the recording information where you can find that, and the link to the broccoli report. And thank you everybody for coming to our presentation. Hopefully it was useful for you all. All right. Okay, so if there's any last minute questions, feel free to post them, but otherwise I will be ending the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.